reinforcements appeared to dispute the 7th Corps passage of the Siegfried Line. To the north, over the Netherlands, the whole sky blossomed with parachutes in the war's largest airborne assault. If the Allied Operation Market Garden had succeeded, the Siegfried Line would have been outflanked, ending the Hurtgen Forest nightmare almost as soon as it began. But the weather, combined with unexpectedly firm German resistance, to prevent the airborne troops from keeping the foothold over the Rhine that would have set the stage for the drive to Berlin. Again, there was no alternative. The Siegfried Line campaign would have to continue. From the deceptively open country and the villages to the north, down to the shadowy heart of the Hurtgen Forest itself, the foot soldiers of the 7th Corps carried their assaults. But for every yard advanced, the next came that much harder. The line had been penetrated, pillboxes captured and destroyed. But of the enemy, an enemy that had fled halfway across Europe and now suddenly turned to fight with a resistance as inexplicable as it was fierce. An enemy that seemed to be everywhere and nowhere all at once. In the confusion and uncertain shadows of the thick trees, the only proofs were the prisoners and the dead laid out at peace on the forest floor. 19 days had passed since General Lightning Joe Collins had pierced the first dragon teeth of the Siegfried Line. But now, as September closed around his 7th Corps and those on either side of him, the entire First Army, for the first time since the breakout at the Normandy beachhead, was stopped. The author of the official Army history from which our narrative is drawn, Mr. Charles D. MacDonald, has been discussing this critical period of World War II with General J. Lawton Collins, retired Army Chief of Staff.
General Collins, the First Army's 7th Corps actually had broken through the Siegfried Line before coming to a halt. But it was not only the fortifications that had stopped them. At that time, you were the 7th Corps commander. What was the situation?
Yes, after the breakthrough in Normandy in late July, we had the Germans on the run, and we wanted to keep them on the run. We didn't want to give them a chance to stop and organize themselves. But I had hoped to get through the Siegfried defenses before we had to stop. But just as we had crossed the German frontier, we began really to run out of gasoline and ammunition, and unfortunately, out of good weather. And the loss of the good weather caused our pro-support aviation practically to stop. And this was a real blow. Men were still in good shape and were anxious to keep going, but they were tired. And even more important, our tanks began to need replacement and repairs. For example, the 3rd Armored Division, which had spearheaded our attack, normally had some 230-odd tanks. But when we hit the Siegfried defenses, only about 75 of them were fully operating. Now, you remember also that the Siegfried defenses east of Aachen were very powerful defenses. And from the high ground overlooking our positions, they were looking right down our throats. Now, an attacker, in order to break through, has to move. And when he does that, he gets out into the open, and then he becomes vulnerable to enemy fire.
The next step now was to build up supplies, bring up reinforcements, and reorganize in order to exploit your breakthrough with the new drive by the First Army to the Rhine River.
Yes, that's right. We had to do all of these things, but we still had unfinished business right where we were. In fact, there were 3 attacks that had to be launched. To the north of Aachen, the First Army had to get its 19th Corps through the Siegfried defenses, and then south of Aachen and the Hurtgen Forest, the 5th Corps, the right-wing corps of the First Army, had also to get forward. But in order for them to move, the 7th Corps in the center had to clear the Hurtgen Forest. These things were necessary in order that we could exploit the breakthrough that we'd already made through the first set of the Siegfried defenses. And then, in addition, we had Aachen, the city of Aachen, on our left. And while we dominated the high ground overlooking Aachen, we couldn't go past the city and leave a pocket of resistance there on our left rear. So therefore, the 7th Corps had to capture Aachen. Now, all of these things, these three attacks, had to be coordinated by General Courtney Hodges, the fine commander of the First Army, who, in my judgment, never has received proper public recognition for the great job that he did in leading the First Army all the way from our breakthrough in Normandy to our meeting with the Russians on the Elbe River.